All right, let's jump right in. We all think we know Home Depot, right? It's the iconic orange box you run to for a weekend DIY project. But behind the scenes, the company has been making this absolutely massive, high-stakes bet, one that could completely redefine its future and take it way beyond the aisles we're all familiar with. And this is the number at the very heart of the story. Over $23 billion. That's what Home Depot has dropped in just a couple of years to totally transform its business. Why? Because they're chasing a customer they could never really reach before. You gotta understand, this isn't just a minor tweak. It's a profound, bet the farm kind of gamble. So here's how we're gonna break this whole thing down. First, we'll look at the bet itself. Then, we'll size up the opportunity they were gunning for. We're gonna meet their new target customer, the so-called Complex Pro, and then get into the actual strategic playbook. After that, we'll check the scoreboard, see how the numbers are looking, and finally, we'll wrestle with the big question. Was it the right move? Okay, let's get into it. Section 1, the big bet. This is really the story of how Home Depot decided to go from being a retail giant for you and me into an industrial-strength supply chain powerhouse. You see, in 2024 and 2025, things got really interesting. The company made the biggest acquisitions in its entire history. This wasn't just about adding a few new products to the shelves. No, this was a clear signal that they were going all in on a completely different kind of customer. So why would they make such a gigantic bet? Well, to get that, we need to look at the market. What was this huge, untapped opportunity that made them look past their loyal DIY crowd? The scale here is just wow. The whole home improvement market is over $1 trillion. $1 trillion. And look at this. While Home Depot was the king of the consumer side, the professional market is actually the bigger piece of the pie. We're talking $600 billion. Now that is an untapped growth engine worth chasing. So even though they had this commanding 17% share of the US market, they were smart enough to see the writing on the wall. To keep growing at the scale they wanted, they had to go conquer the other side of the industry, the pro side. Their main business was fantastic, sure, but it wasn't where the future growth was going to come from. And that brings us to the new target of all that investment. We're talking about a very specific customer who is a world away from the person buying a can of paint on a Saturday. So let's meet this Complex Pro. Now, a Complex Pro is not your average handyman. Not even close. These are contractors running major projects. They aren't walking down the aisles. They need specialized delivery. Think a boom truck hoisting a pallet of roofing shingles directly onto a job site. And they need massive lines of credit to keep their cash flow moving on these huge jobs. And this right here is the key difference. Home Depot was already amazing at serving what you might call the transactional pro, the handyman who pops in and buys stuff right off the shelf. But to win over the Complex Pro, they needed a completely different engine, a massive distribution network that their retail stores just weren't built for. So what did they do? They went out and bought it. First, the enormous $18.25 billion deal for SRS distribution in 2024. Boom! Instantly, they had a nationwide network of over 760 branches and a 4,000 truck fleet. Then, in 2025, they snagged GMS Inc. for another $5.5 billion, giving them expertise in specialized stuff like wallboard and ceilings. They literally built a B2B ecosystem almost overnight. So we've seen the what. Now, let's get into the why. What was the strategy, the business school logic behind these massive buys? Because believe me, this was a very, very calculated play. The playbook really had 3 core parts. First, market segmentation. They split their business in 2, retail stores for one kind of pro and these new distribution networks for the other. Second, vertical diversification. By owning the distributors, they get a bigger and much more profitable piece of the pro's total spending. And third, and this is the killer move, creating a physical moat. With over 3,500 physical locations combined, they've built something that a digital-only rival like Amazon just can't copy. Okay, so that's the strategy. But is it actually working? Let's take a look at the scorecard and see what the early numbers from this huge pivot tell us. All right, looking at the numbers for fiscal 2025, things are looking pretty solid. Sales are up over 3% to nearly $165 billion, and the market cap is hovering around a massive $388 billion. The big takeaway here is that the company is healthy. It swallowed these huge acquisitions without a major shock to the system. But this is the chart that tells the real story. By the end of 2024, for the first time ever, sales to professional customers made up more than half of Home Depot's total revenue.
Think about that. The company's center of gravity has officially shifted from the DIY consumer to the pro. The transformation is real. It actually happened. So the shift is definitely real. The company's DNA has changed. Which brings us to our final section, and the biggest question of all. We've seen the why, we've seen the how, but at the end of the day, was it the right call? And I think this quote just nails the whole idea. This wasn't just about chasing growth. It was a defensive move. By betting on the constant, necessary work that pros do, fixing the aging roof of America that always needs repair, they've built a business that's designed to be more resilient, even when the housing market gets all choppy. And that leaves us with the final question, which I'm going to turn over to you. For all the leaders, entrepreneurs, and strategists watching this, did Home Depot make the right call? Was spending over $23 billion the smartest way to future-proof the iconic orange box? Or did they bite off more than they can chew? I'm really curious to hear what you think.